on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. Welcome to the fourth class for the Kabbalah of the Soul. Tanya, class number 4. I am Rabbi Cherninsky, the rector of Chabad of Newfoundland. Always a pleasure to be here with you. Hope you're having a wonderful day. If you're watching from Florida, it's not quite Florida here in Newfoundland. It's quite cold and windy, so enjoy the weather. And let's go straight into it. So we had said last class, we're going now through the introduction to the Tanya. We didn't start speaking about chapter 1. We spoke about the Tanya in class number 1. We spoke about the purpose of the holy book of Tanya, class number 1 and 2. 2 and 3, we spoke about who the Beinoni is, since the Tanya is written for the Beinoni, the average person. We said that was the note of the Tanya, written for the average Joe, showing the average Joe that he could become Super Joe. And God's not expecting us to be Superman, but to be super you, to reach the potential that's hidden within you. And that's it. Not to be somebody else, but to be you 100%. So today's class, we are going to be speaking outside the text of the actual introduction. Last class, we spoke about the cover page, what's called the Sharblat of the Tanya. Now this is about the introduction. And the question is, as you've seen the description here, can a book, even a holy book, replace a mentor of flesh and blood? A colleague of mine got a phone call a couple of months ago, and it was the parents of a very smart, intelligent boy studying in a yeshiva who was suffering from tremendous social anxiety. And so my colleague asked him a few questions. Does it disturb his day to day? Blah blah blah. And said yes. So I said, well, if he can't function properly, then he needs to get treatment. He needs to go to a therapist. So the parents then asked another question, and they said, well, does it need to be a physical therapist, or could he take a book? Read a book. There's many books out there on self-help. There's books especially tailored to young men and women as they struggle through adulthood, teenagers. So is that enough? Interestingly enough, so that's the exact same thing that the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, the author of the Tanya, comes to address here in the introduction. Okay, so let's get on the way. The question is a very valid question. You go to your bookshelf, and you could pick up a book of Hasidic thought. You could pick up a book of Musar, about rebuke, that speaks of how negative certain traits are, like the Reishis Chachma, Mesilas Yesharim. There's many, many books. And so perhaps this is enough. Why do I need a spiritual guide of flesh and blood? In Chabad, it would be called a mashpia, others call it a mashgiach. I could grow, I could sprout, I could advance from reading a book. And that's what the Alter Rebbe speaks about right at the beginning, in the introduction to the Tanya. Most authors write longer introductions about what's the purpose of the book. Here in the Tanya, Alter Rebbe wrote the purpose of the book in 3 lines. Now the introduction, which is a page and a half, it's completely different. And he's showing us that this tiny book has what you need to realize your purpose in serving God and feel fulfilled. Most people didn't write books like the way the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya. Even the Hasidic leaders before him didn't write a book. The Maggid of Mesrich, the Alter Rebbe's teacher, and the Baal Shem Tov, the teacher of the Maggid and the leader of the Hasidic movement, they didn't write books. Even the counterparts in the Lithuanian community, who were against the Hasidic movement at the time, didn't write many books. Sforim. Why? The Hasidic movement, one of the main ideas is that you need a Rebbe, you need a leader, a person of flesh and blood to guide you, help you serve God, and for you to reach your potential. to lift yourself up to heaven, you need somebody else to help you out. You need to be in a community, you need to have a synagogue, you need to have a beis medrash, a house of study, you need to have a Farbrengen, an informal Hasidic gathering, and the Rebbe to pick you up, lift you up. So he wrote the Tanya. How can the Tanya solve that problem? The Tanya is not a person. How can a book have the answers to a person that's confused, a person that's perplexed, a person that has doubts? And we see in the introduction that the Alter Rebbe dedicates more time to the question and to the answer, which teaches us that even as we learn from the Tanya cannot replace that person-to-person interaction with a mentor of flesh and blood. The thirst of a Hasidic Jew, is to be with his Rebbe, to learn direct from his Rebbe, flesh and blood. So first, the Alter Rebbe speaks about what's so great about the flesh and blood interaction, the physical interaction with a mentor. You could see his eyes, he could shake your hand before COVID. And that's something that Tanya cannot replace. The question is, though, why do we need a guide altogether? As we began before. Why do Hasidic Jews go to a Rebbe? Why can a good bocher, a good boy sitting in a yeshiva, he's a God-fearing Jew, he has a good head for study, so let him buy a sefer, a holy book, whatever it might be, the Tanya, Rishis Chochma, open it, study, become close to Hashem. Why do we need a leader of flesh and blood? Why can't I grow just on my own? The answer is the guide reminds us how far we could reach. To remind ourselves of something we might have forgotten. By nature, you can only jump a couple centimeters or inches above your height. If you want to do more than that, you need a trainer, a personal trainer, a guide, someone who knows what you don't know about yourself, someone who's in a higher spiritual level, who opens up your world. He tells you, look how skilled you are, look how much potential you have. He opens up your eyes to the divine providence in the world, to the miracles in the world. He shows you the presence of God in creation, in everything, in every second. He lifts you up to heights you didn't even know you had. As we find when the Jews were in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, God didn't just say, okay, I'm going to kill the Egyptians and you go out. No, he sent Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, a redeemer. Why? Why do we need a person? Why, and why Moshe specifically? Yeah, he was the youngest brother, right? Miriam and Aaron were older. And Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu asks questions to God. The first interaction they had, Moses says, Shlach Nabi Atishlach, please send whomever you're used to sending, which was Aaron, his older brother, right? As we know, he didn't want to start another family feud. The book of Genesis, the book of Bereshit, is full of fights amongst brothers when the younger brother is favored over the older one. So he says, I don't want to have anything to do with that. And Aaron speaks better than me. He is a lot more involved in social issues, as it says that he counseled husband and wives that had marital harmony problems. He helped friends who got into fights. Aaron could communicate well. He's the speaker, but not me. That's what Moses says, not me. So in particular, why Moses? In general, why do we need a leader altogether? Why can't just God take the Jews out of Egypt? And the answer is, Ein chavush mati desatzmei. Somebody who's captive cannot release himself. To live exile, to live Golus, you need someone that looks from on high to see and show you how much Hashem is involved in the world. How many miracles are happening, right? So God, Hashem, brings Moses into the picture because Moses was not in Egypt. He was not enslaved like the Jewish nation was. He came from the city of Midian. So he goes in with God's help. They turn nature into Play-Doh with the 10 plagues, the plague of blood, the plague of frogs, etc., showing the Jews how great they are and how great they could become. A person can live himself. You have a certain limit. There's only so much you could grow on yourself. Everybody knows every good businessman has a coach, a business coach. The coach pushes you beyond your limits, opens up your world. Recognize the power of your soul, your Ein Sofiut, your unlimitedness. So for that, you need to connect with somebody that's higher than you on a spiritual level. That person lifts you up. Okay. So now we know we need to have a guide. So why can't a book, a holy book, a Sefer be my guide? And here in the introduction, the Alter Rebbe writes almost an apology, and he speaks about this. Yes, that we learn better from flesh and blood. Why? For two reasons. Number one, a person, a guide, a mentor, a Rebbe brings the message closer to us. And number two, he explains how it's relevant to you in particular. Why it makes a difference to you. This message in this book could change your life. This message in Judaism is transformational. Every person reacts and connects to things differently. One person connects to something by hearing a story, someone else by a hug, someone else has a more of an analytical mind, someone else needs to get scared, to get a titter, to shake, to realize the seriousness of things. And there are two beautiful stories that the Lubavitch Rebbe shared that speak about what a Rebbe is, what a spiritual guide is. The Mittel Rebbe, the son of the Alter Rebbe, who took over the leadership of Chabad, is a very deep Jew, tremendous intellectual, and his followers waited to go on Yechidos to have a private audience with him. We mentioned this concept in the first class. One person came to ask for a blessing for success in making a living. Another one asked for a blessing to marry his children. Another one for a blessing. He should be able to pray better. He should be able to fight his temptations. So one time in the middle of the day, in the middle of Yechidas, in the middle of these audiences, the assistant of the Mitzvah says, okay, it's over, closes the door, no one else is coming in. Everybody figured, okay, by tomorrow, we'll be back on track. But that's not what happened. The next day, the door is still closed, the Rebbe is not taking anybody in. And it was weeks and months until the Hasidim pleaded with the Mittler Rebbe, the second Rebbe of Chabad, to open up again, to guide them, to show them how to serve Hashem, serve God properly. And he acquiesced, and he explained why he had closed his door. He said that when somebody comes and asks for advice, for an Eitzah, I try to find within myself that very same thing they're asking, even though it could be the most perverted, lowly question. I try to find within myself that same thing in a subtle way. Only then I could give them advice and they could internalize the advice. That's story number one. Story number two, this happened when the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, known as the Rebbe Rashab, and his older brother, Reb Zalman Aaron, were little children. They didn't play soccer in their house. They played Rebbe and Chosid from what they saw from their father, the fourth Rebbe of Chabad, the Rebbe Maharash. So they're playing that the Rebbe Rashab, the younger brother, is coming to the older brother, as if the older brother is the Rebbe. The older brother is wearing the big shtreimel, the big fur hat that belonged to their father. So he goes in and he tells him, the Rebbe Rashab says, I did something wrong. I want a tikkun. I want a rectification for my soul. Last Shabbat, I broke nuts. That according to the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, what he writes in his siddur, it's something that you're not allowed to do. In the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, he writes that it's okay. But later on, the siddur that he wrote later, in the back, he wrote a number of rulings, and he wrote that you're not supposed to break open nuts to eat on Shabbos, on Shabbat. So the Rebbe Rashab tells his brother, I did I did that. I broke the nuts. So his brother says, as a tikkun, a form of rectification, and there's different versions of the story. Either he told him to study the laws of Shabbat, or he told him to make sure to pray from inside the prayer book, the siddur, whenever you pray. He thanked him and he walked away. Later on, his mother, Rebbetzin Rivka, sees that Rebbe Rashab is not following what his older brother told him while they were playing. She says, how come you're not following his advice? So the Rebbe Rashab said, nah, this Zalman Aaron, his older brother, he's no Rebbe. What do you mean? Because the Rebbe geta krechts. When the Rebbe gives advice, he sighs. A Rebbe feels for the person that's coming to him with an issue. To feel the message that somebody's telling you, that this message has light, this message has hope, that this could change your life, to connect to the heart of the message, you need a smile, somebody that's alive behind that message. That's what a teacher, a real teacher, gives you that a book, a sefer cannot replace. And number two, again, you need somebody that brings the message to the specific student, because everybody absorbs things differently. Somebody's excited by a story, somebody is more close to a story that has to do with kindness, love. Somebody is more excited, relates more to fear. Somebody is more interested in the analysis, a question and an answer. Somebody wants to know the sources where things come from. And each and every person has their way that they connect to God, their way they connect to Hashem. That's why the whole Torah, there are arguments and division right from the beginning. When the Jews were wandering in the desert, they were divided into 12 tribes. And they encamped separately, each tribe by itself. They didn't mix. Why not? Aren't we one nation with one Hashem, one God? We find already last week's Parsha, last week's Torah portion, Vayechi, Jacob gave each one of his sons, who became the 12 tribes, their own individual blessing. You're going to become a Torah scholar, you're going to go into business, etc. Each one is different. But why did they have to have this separation? Some explain that the reason why even in the desert they encamped separately is like an army division. It's like an army that has different divisions. But that's not right. How do we know? Because the prophet Ezekiel says that each tribe, when Mashiach comes, will go into the Beis Hamikdash, the temple, by a different gate. But why? Our whole Torah has division arguments built into it. And the answer is so beautiful. Listen to this. Because each person has his own way in serving God, serving Hashem. Every savoda, every idea, every intellectual approach, every halacha, every law could be explained, appreciated from two different points of view. We know that Beis Hillel, in the yeshiva of Hillel, they tend to be more lenient. The yeshiva of Shammai, Beis Shammai, they tend to be more strict. Somebody that his soul has more connected in a revealed aspect, he has more kindness, so he will also lean towards being lenient in law. Somebody who, in a revealed way, he has aspect of severity, gevura, he will be more like Beis Shammai. He will lean towards being more strict. So they see the Torah makes it possible for everyone to find their own derech, their own way within Torah. If there were no arguments, if there was no division, then not everybody would feel that it's theirs. One person would say, it doesn't speak to me. I have a different approach, a different way of looking at it. In other words, even though the actual law, the ruling is one way, in general, like Beis Hillel, not like Shammai. When it comes to Jewish law, you don't follow both opinions, you follow one opinion. But still, just the fact that in the argument, in the logic, there are two ways to look at it, Everybody could relate to it. Such a beautiful thing. Every person has his own way of serving God, and we're all different. Not everybody is in business, and everybody studies the whole day. And that's the purpose of a rabbi, a mentor, a guide, that he is able to bring down the Torah to everybody on their individual level, in the way that they could relate to it, they could understand it and say, the Torah is speaking to me. Right? So a book doesn't smile, doesn't shine. We don't see the light in the book. We don't, the book is not bringing the message down to you. And number two, it's not the style that speaks to you. So the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, he is writing a book that, in a way, is against the Hasidic tradition that you need a physical Rebbe, a guide, and he writes that. So why did he write a book nevertheless? He had no choice. Leis B'reida, no choice. There were too many people come to him for advice, and he didn't have enough time. That's what he writes in the introduction. So Tanya has two things that make it unique. Number one is written as answers to real questions. The Alter Rebbe didn't just sit like a hermit by a mountain or in the forest thinking, what is the ideal way to serve God? How can a righteous person serve God? So no. He did not write a book about himself, for himself. He wrote a book about questions that the Hasidim, his followers, asked him, with their doubts, with their struggles in serving God. Tanya is a collection of questions from people from all over the spectrum. And from us, the Alter Rebbe gave, they put together a book that could speak to every person, because it's written to every person. It's written to all sorts of people that came to ask him questions. It's not a book of theory, it's a book of guidance. And then number two, we have a tradition that the Alter Rebbe put his whole being into the Tanya. Ana nafshi kesavis Yehovis. He put his essence into the Tanya. He put himself into the book, into the Sefer. And he reveals himself to whomever is searching. Whomever is searching for an answer, he will find it. Hasidim give an example for this, like the Chumash, the Torah, that every Jew could relate to the stories in the Chumash. And the rabbi, we know a rabbi could connect everything that happens in the world with the parsha of the week, the Torah portion of the week, from Washington to the deepest concepts. Why? Because God is in the Chumash, God is in the Torah, and God is infinite. And therefore, it could connect to everybody and everything. In the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, he put himself in it. So everybody could find an answer to their troubles. No matter which situation you're in, you could find yourself in the Tanya. Yeah? And if you find Alter Rebbe in the Tanya, he will find you. Because it's a sefer that's written with all the answers to all the questions. L'chaim, thank you for listening. I'm Rabbi Chernitzky, director of Chabad of Newfoundland. Always a pleasure. God willing, next Monday we'll pick it up with class number 5. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please send us a message, or you can write me an email, rabbinewfoundland@gmail.com, and you could check out our wonderful website. Guess what it is? rabbinewfoundland.com. Have a wonderful day, and make the world a better place.